You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin. I sat at my kitchen table, a cold cup of coffee in front of me, my phone buzzing in the background. Each notification was from Karen, her friends, or her family, demanding an explanation, demanding anything. I didn't respond right away. The anger, the hurt, all the thoughts that should have been brewing inside me were already solidifying into a quiet, cold resolve. She didn't get to do this to me, not after everything. I opened my email and typed a message to the fishing trip organizer, telling him it was off. No reason to keep that in place when my future had just been gutted by a joke. The wedding coordinator wasn't much different. I was still staring at my phone, fingers frozen over the screen, when I sent that email too. Stop all plans. Short, simple, final. I'd already changed the passwords to the shared accounts Karen and I had set up, blocked her access to our wedding planning spreadsheets. Then the texts started rolling in. Karen's friends accused me of overreacting, of being petty. You're making her look like the villain, one of them wrote. She's just having fun, Daniel. You're ruining her life. My thumb hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to tell them they had no fucking clue what was going on. But the other part of me knew it wouldn't matter. They were all her friends, the same people who laughed as she tore me down. Another message came in, this time from Karen's sister. You have to talk to her. She's crying. She didn't mean it. You know how Karen is. I slammed my phone down and stood up, pacing the kitchen. What the hell had just happened? Everything had been set. The trip, the wedding, the life we were supposed to build. And now it was all gone. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I didn't need to open it to know who it was. The frantic voice that rang through the wood only confirmed it. Daniel, please open up. I need to talk to you. Karen. I opened the door, watching her stand there in the hall, eyes puffy, her usual calm demeanor replaced with desperation. I know you're angry, but I didn't mean it, Daniel. It was a joke. Just a joke. You're right. You didn't mean it, and that's the problem. I folded my arms, leaning against the doorframe. You humiliated me, Karen. You put it out there for the whole world to see. And you think I'm supposed to just laugh it off? She winced, her hands wringing the fabric of her jacket. Daniel, please. I was just trying to fit in with my friends. You know how they are. It was never about you. It was just a joke, a bad one, okay? I'm sorry. No, I said, shaking my head. It wasn't just a joke. You said, honestly, maybe not. I repeated her words back to her, each one slicing deeper. That wasn't a joke, Karen. That was the truth, and you let it slip in front of everyone. Do you have any idea how that felt? Her eyes darted to the ground, and she took a deep breath, her voice faltering. I was nervous about everything, about the wedding, about the future, and I panicked. Panicked, I repeated, my voice low. Panicked about what? About marrying someone who actually cares about you, who puts you first, or about someone who only fits into your carefully curated life when it's convenient. Her eyes finally met mine. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said, voice soft. I never wanted to hurt you. It's just, sometimes I wonder if I'm making the right decision, you know? If I'm settling too soon. I felt my pulse quicken. I'm sorry, Karen, but that's not something you just say and expect to fix with an I'm sorry. That's a decision. That's something you've been thinking about for a while now, haven't you? She stopped herself, looking away, and I saw it. The truth I had been avoiding for months. The doubt in her eyes wasn't new, and it sure as hell wasn't the result of some bad joke. It was everything she had been hiding from me, everything she'd been too afraid to say. I took a step back. I can't do this, Karen. I can't keep pretending like I'm not seeing it. You don't want to marry me. You're not sure about this. And you made that clear. To everyone. To everyone. My words were steady, but inside, I was shattering. She stepped forward, her voice pleading. Daniel, please, don't do this. Don't let one mistake ruin everything. Everything's already ruined, Karen. I turned away from her, the silence hanging in the air, thick and suffocating. I felt like I was suffocating. I'm done. I'm done being your backup plan, your last resort when things get uncomfortable. I'm not that guy. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the storm brewing in her eyes. She didn't like this version of me. Didn't like that I was standing my ground. This isn't over, Daniel, she said, grabbing her suitcase by the door. I'll be back to get my stuff. Don't bother, I said, voice flat. I'll send it to you. When you're ready to stop pretending you care, you know where to find me. She didn't say another word, just turned, marched out the door, and left. The click of the lock behind her felt like an anchor falling into place, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the weight lifting. It was over. The phone rang just as I was finishing my lunch, an odd feeling of heaviness still lingering from Karen's departure. I didn't recognize the number, but I had a gut feeling I knew who it was. I answered anyway, not bothering to hide the annoyance in my voice. Hello? Daniel. Gerald's voice came through, tight with frustration. What the hell is going on? Your fiancé tells me you've called everything off, but we haven't even gotten a straight answer from you. This trip to Alaska, the wedding, what are you doing? I sat back in my chair, the cold coffee sitting untouched next to me. I'm doing what's best for me. After everything that happened, I don't think this wedding's happening anymore. You're wasting money, Daniel. Our money, too. Gerald's tone was sharper now, rising in anger. I don't know how you expect me to look at this and pretend it's nothing. She told me she was joking about what she said, but now we're looking at flights, deposits, everything's gone. You made the choice, and now we all have to pay the price. I rubbed my forehead, trying to keep my patience. I'll cover my portion of the non-refundable deposits. I'm not trying to screw anyone over here, Gerald, but Karen made her choice loud and clear. He paused for a moment. What do you mean? What choice? I leaned forward. I sent you the recording of the live stream. She said it herself, remember? Maybe not. That's not a joke. That's the truth. I haven't seen the stream, he muttered. I didn't know about this live stream business. Then you should watch it, I said, my voice controlled but firm. You'll hear it straight from her. This wedding isn't happening. I'm done. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear him breathe, the weight of the situation sinking in. After a few seconds, his voice was quieter, more measured. I don't like how quickly you're pulling the plug, but I get it. I really do. You understand? I asked, a little surprised by the shift. Yeah, I understand. He sighed deeply. But I'm still pissed off. I get where you're coming from, but I wish you'd have talked to us. We've all invested in this, Daniel, all of us. And now we're looking at wasted money, time, effort. You're not just walking away from her. You're walking away from everyone. I could feel the sting of his words, but I didn't let it show. I can't keep trying to fix someone else's mistakes. And if this is the mess they've created, then I'm not cleaning it up. I'm done. Gerald's voice softened, almost reluctantly. All right, but I still think you need to talk to her family, sort out the finances at least. You owe that much. I'll meet with them, I said, my stomach nodding at the thought, but I'm not doing it on anyone's terms but mine. I hear you. He paused again. Look, just don't do anything rash, all right? Talk to her. Settle things the right way. I don't want to see you lose everything over this, Daniel. I had to bite back the bitterness that rose in my throat. It's too late for that, Gerald. It's already gone. With that, I ended the call, the weight of his disappointment pressing down on me. I wasn't sure what I expected, an apology, a sympathy card, something. But instead, all I felt was a bitter, cold clarity. This was the cost of caring too much. And now, I wasn't going to keep paying. I stared at the screen of my phone, debating whether to send Karen a message to confirm a time to meet. Something told me she'd still try to reach out, to somehow fix things. But I wasn't going to let her pull me back into the same cycle of hurt and compromise. The next day, Karen's family and I arranged a time to meet at a coffee shop near her parents' house. I didn't want to meet in her home, not after the way things had ended. It felt too final, too intimate. When I walked in, I found her parents already sitting at a table in the corner. They weren't smiling. No pleasantries, no warm hello. Just the cold weight of what had happened hanging between us. Her dad, Gerald's friend, looked up as I approached, his eyes tired but expectant. Daniel, he said, standing to shake my hand. Thanks for agreeing to meet. We need to settle this, don't we? I nodded, taking a seat. Yeah, I think it's time we settled everything. Karen's mom, sitting across from me, folded her hands neatly on the table. We understand you're upset, but you have to understand. This isn't just about you. There's money involved, family involved, and, well, you and Karen had plans. I raised an eyebrow. Plans? I asked. I think Karen's plans were made without me in them. Her mother bristled but controlled herself. Daniel, that's not fair. You know how hard this has been for her, for both of you? I know, I said, biting back my anger, but I can't keep living a life that's been built on lies. And I'm sorry, but I don't think I'm the one who owes anyone an apology here. Karen's father shifted in his seat. Look, we're all frustrated, but you've been a part of this family for a long time. This is a big change, and I'm not sure walking away is the best answer. I'm not walking away, Gerald, I said, my voice steady. I'm making the right choice, for me. This is no longer about saving face. This is about stepping away from something that never should have been. He exhaled sharply, looking at his wife. She sighed, shaking her head. After a tense silence, I continued. I'll pay my part of the deposits. Let's figure out the financials. After that, I'm done. I'll send over a check for the shared expenses, and we can handle everything else from there. Karen's mother leaned back, a tight smile forming. Fine, she said, but there was no warmth in it. I think that's fair. I looked at both of them and stood up. I'll send the check within the next few days. Please let Karen know the wedding is off. I don't think there's anything else to discuss. As I turned to leave, I could feel Karen's family's eyes on my back. I was certain they wouldn't be the last to make me feel guilty about all of this. But for once, I didn't care. This was over, and I was finally free. The diner was one of those places that felt like it belonged to another time. Neon lights flickered overhead. The booths were worn but comfortable, and the smell of grease hung in the air. I hated it. Hated the idea of meeting Karen, her parents, and her brother in a place like this. But it was the only spot that felt neutral, and frankly, I needed the distance. I didn't want to be anywhere that felt like her world. I arrived a few minutes early and sat at the back booth, pretending to scroll through my phone while I waited. The low hum of conversation filled the space, but it did nothing to distract me. My thoughts kept racing back to the live stream, the way Karen's voice had sounded, the smile on her face when she joked about me, the one line that tore through everything. Honestly, maybe not. I still couldn't believe it, and I was about to sit here, across from the people who'd raised her, the ones who probably didn't even know the truth about what had happened. It was enough to make me feel like I was the one in the wrong. Karen walked in first, looking like she had just come from a photo shoot instead of the emotional wreckage we'd left behind. She didn't look at me as she slid into the booth across from me. Her eyes quickly flicked to the side, meeting her parents and brother as they sat down behind her. There was an awkwardness in the air, but it wasn't the kind you get when you're about to have a tense conversation. This felt more like a goodbye. Daniel, Karen's dad said, his voice still warm, but with a layer of frustration underneath. You're sure about this? About everything? I nodded, not looking at anyone but Karen. I wasn't here to explain myself anymore. Yeah, I'm sure. Her mother cleared her throat, obviously uncomfortable with the quiet tension that had settled in the booth. We just want to get this sorted out. You know, the wedding, the trip, all the things you two have planned. Karen's been very upset, her brother Peter chimed in. This whole thing is a shock. We didn't expect you to just end things. I didn't react. I just looked at Karen, waiting for her to say something, to own what she had done. But she didn't. Instead, she just stared down at the table, her fingers picking at the napkin in front of her. I didn't mean for it to be like this, she muttered. Her dad leaned in, trying to soften the moment. Maybe we can talk about the financials, Daniel. You're right, this is a lot of money we've invested, but we just need to know how to move forward. I pulled out a folded piece of paper from my bag and slid it across the table. Here's my portion. I'm covering what's mine, but I'm done after this. Her dad picked up the paper, scanning it quickly. You're walking away? After all this? Yeah, I said, not flinching. I'm walking away. I'm done cleaning up after everyone. Karen finally looked up at me, her face pinched with frustration. You don't get it, do you? I was just stressed. I was trying to fit in, to keep up with everything, and I made a mistake. But it wasn't supposed to be this way. I didn't let her off the hook. You don't get to say that, Karen. You don't get to say, I was just stressed after saying what you did. You put me down in front of everyone, and you can't take that back. This isn't just about the wedding or the trip. It's about you not being able to own up to what you've been thinking for months. Karen's eyes hardened, and I saw her jaw clench. You're being so cold. You've changed. I felt the sting of her words, but I stood my ground. I've changed because I finally woke up. I don't want to marry someone who's not sure about me, Who makes me feel like I'm not good enough? Her mother shifted uncomfortably, trying to pull the conversation back to safer ground. Can we just talk about the details for now, please? We don't need to do this in front of everyone. But Karen wasn't done. It's not that simple. It's not just the wedding. I didn't mean to hurt you, Daniel. But can't you see? We've been growing apart. I've been wondering for a while now if I was rushing into this. I couldn't believe she was still trying to spin this, still trying to make me the bad guy. My voice dropped. And I was trying to make it work, Karen. But you can't hide behind jokes anymore. The live stream, that was the truth. Everything else was just a lie. Her face twisted with emotion, and for a second, I thought she might break down. But instead, she stood up, her eyes flashing with anger. You're right. This isn't over, Daniel. She grabbed her bag and started to storm out. I watched her go, the door swinging shut behind her with a dull thud. It didn't feel satisfying, not like I thought it would. It just felt empty. Her dad sighed, running a hand through his hair. This isn't how I wanted it to go, but I understand where you're coming from. I'll make sure Karen gets the message. We'll handle the finances. I nodded, feeling the weight of it all settle on my shoulders. I'd come here to settle things, but I realized that Karen was never going to take responsibility for what she'd done. Not in front of me, not in front of anyone. I had to let that go. Peter stood up, his face a mask of discomfort. I'll pass on the message too, he muttered. I just hope you know what you're doing, Daniel. I do, I said, my voice steady. It's over. And for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally free. I hadn't heard from Karen in a few days, but I knew that wasn't going to last long. She had been silent on social media, and every few hours, a text or missed call from her friends would pop up. They wanted answers. They wanted me to feel guilty. I didn't. The guilt had been there at first, like some heavy weight pressing against my chest. But with each passing day, it lifted a little more. Karen's posts were vague at first, feeling misunderstood. Sometimes you just need space to figure things out. The kind of indirect bullshit I was used to. But the one that hit me hard was the last one. It was a picture of her sitting alone in a cafe, staring out the window with a sad, almost defeated expression. The caption, "Sometimes the hardest part is realizing you've lost something you never truly understood." I wanted to respond, to fire back with the truth, but I didn't. I'd seen it all before. The way she played the victim. The way she tried to manipulate people into feeling sorry for her. This time, I stayed quiet. I threw myself into work at the auto parts distribution center. It was routine, predictable, but it gave me something to focus on other than Karen and the mess we'd left behind. I started showing up earlier, taking on extra shifts. At least at work, things made sense. I didn't let her get to me. I couldn't. I also started going to the gym again, early mornings before work. It was a good way to clear my head. The first few sessions felt awkward, like I was going through the motions just to keep busy. But after a couple of weeks, it became something I looked forward to. The burn in my muscles, the rhythm of the weights, the steady rush of blood pumping through my veins. It felt like a release. The first weekend after Karen left, I went hiking alone. Ben had invited me to tag along, but I needed the solitude. I needed to be somewhere that wasn't familiar, somewhere that didn't remind me of her. The trail was quiet, the kind of quiet where the only sounds were my footsteps and the occasional bird call. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in months. I wasn't thinking about Karen. I wasn't thinking about anything, just breathing in the fresh air and taking in the landscape. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive. When I got back home, Ben called. "So, I've been thinking, you're still planning to go to Alaska, right?" I hesitated. I had been avoiding the thought, trying not to make any final decisions, but I knew what he was getting at. "I don't know," I said. "It feels weird, going alone. It's a honeymoon package. A honeymoon." "Yeah, I get it." Ben was quiet for a moment, then added, "But what if you go? Not as a honeymoon, but just for you. You could rework the whole thing, make it about exploring. No deadlines, no schedules, just a trip to clear your head." I rubbed my eyes, trying to process it. He was right. The trip didn't have to be what I'd originally planned. The whole thing had been about Karen, about the two of us. But now, it could be about me, about reclaiming my own space. "I'll think about it," I said, finally feeling a bit of excitement spark. I did. And after a week of mulling it over, I booked the damn trip. I adjusted the itinerary, made it less rigid, more focused on the things I wanted to see. I picked out a few excursions, some hiking, some photography, nothing too structured. And for the first time since everything had fallen apart, I felt something other than anger or numbness. I felt anticipation. There was a world out there, one that didn't involve Karen, one that was just waiting for me to step into it. Ben was the first person I told. "You're really doing it?" he asked, sounding genuinely excited. "Yeah, I am," I said. "I need this." "Good for you," Ben replied. "Sometimes the best decisions are the ones that scare you the most." I packed light. Only what I needed. I'd made a rule for myself. No more overpacking for someone else's idea of a good time. The trip wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about me finding myself again. Something I hadn't realized I'd lost until now. The day I left, I felt the weight of the past months finally start to lift. The airport was a blur of faces and destinations, but I was calm. Not the anxious, uncertain version of myself that had spiraled after Karen left, but a person who was stepping forward into the unknown with a sense of clarity. The flight to Alaska felt like a blur, but as soon as I touched down, it hit me, the freedom. The air was cold and sharp, but in a way that felt fresh, invigorating. The lodge where I was staying had a rustic charm to it, far removed from the sterile luxury honeymoon package it had originally been intended for. When I checked in, the receptionist assumed I was on my honeymoon. I politely corrected her, a small smile tugging at my lips. No, not a honeymoon. Just a guy rediscovering his own path. The next few days were a whirlwind of fishing, hiking, and photographing the landscape. I felt a deep sense of peace, something I hadn't known I needed. The mountains loomed in the distance, untouched by time, and I felt small in the best way possible. I wasn't running away from anything. I was letting go. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, I sat on the edge of a dock, the cool air swirling around me. I pulled out my camera and began to snap a few photos, trying to capture the beauty around me. I wasn't trying to create something for anyone else. I was creating for me. That's when Claire walked up. She was a travel photographer I'd met on one of the hikes, someone who also found solace in nature. We exchanged a few pleasantries and quickly fell into conversation about our shared love of photography and adventure. She invited me to join her for a campfire dinner the next evening, and we talked about everything and nothing. She was easy to talk to, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I found myself laughing. As the days passed, we kept running into each other, sharing meals, and exploring the quiet corners of Alaska. Claire didn't ask about my past, and I didn't feel the need to volunteer it. We just existed in the present, and that was enough. I realized that this trip, this solitude, was more about reclaiming myself than anything else. It wasn't about replacing Karen. It was about rediscovering who I was before I ever let anyone else define me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. In fact, I felt like I had everything I needed. A few months had passed since the diner, and I had gotten used to the quiet. My life had settled into something more routine, more mine. I was no longer caught in the whirlwind of Karen's chaos, and as much as I hated to admit it, I was starting to feel a sense of peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from pretending everything's fine, but the kind that comes from being alone, truly alone, for the first time in years. My phone buzzed one afternoon while I was at work. It was an email from Tasha. I hadn't heard from her since the breakup, but I recognized her name immediately. She'd been Karen's best friend, and the one behind the camera during that fateful live stream. The subject line read, "Can we meet?" I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Why now? Why after all this time? But I knew. Karen wasn't the only one who had been hiding things. Tasha had always seemed loyal to Karen, even when I could tell she didn't entirely agree with her. I decided to reply, sure, when and where? She suggested a coffee shop in the downtown area, a quiet place we both knew. I didn't expect much, but I felt a strange need for closure, or maybe just to understand what had really been going on. I showed up 20 minutes early, ordering a black coffee and finding a seat near the back. Tasha was right on time, looking less polished than usual, wearing a hoodie and jeans. She spotted me immediately and walked over, her eyes avoiding mine at first. "Hey," she said, sitting down and running a hand through her hair. "Thanks for meeting me." I gave her a small nod. "You said you had something to say?" She stared at the table for a second, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. I wanted to apologize, Daniel. Her voice was steady but quiet. I lied. I didn't mean to, but I did. And I feel like you deserve to know the truth. I raised an eyebrow. The truth? Tasha hesitated, then took a deep breath. Karen's been unhappy for a long time. It wasn't just the joke, the live stream thing. It wasn't just the wedding either. She had doubts about the relationship before everything happened. She was just too scared to face it. So she used the jokes, the little digs at you to mask it. She told me once she wasn't sure if she was settling for you. I leaned back, trying to let her words sink in. So, she knew. Tasha nodded, her eyes meeting mine for the first time. Yeah, she knew, but she didn't want to admit it. She didn't want to admit to anyone, especially herself, that she wasn't ready, that she wasn't sure about you. So, she used those jokes as an escape. You were the safe choice. My chest tightened. It was like hearing the final nail in the coffin. I'd suspected as much, but hearing it from someone else made it feel real in a way I hadn't fully processed before. Tasha continued. She didn't want to hurt you. She just didn't know how to tell you she was having second thoughts. And then, when you saw the live stream, she panicked. She couldn't take back what she said. She couldn't undo it. So, she tried to blame you. She told me it was all just a joke. She kept saying you were overreacting, but I knew you weren't. I swallowed, feeling the weight of the situation press down on me. So, you knew she was playing me? Tasha winced. I didn't know how to say anything. She was my best friend. But I also saw the way she treated you, how she used you without even realizing it. I didn't agree with her, but I didn't know what to do. I stared at my coffee, trying to wrap my head around everything Tasha had just shared. It wasn't surprising, not really. I'd known Karen had doubts, but hearing it laid out like this, it made me sick to my stomach. She hadn't just been careless. She'd been actively hiding her true feelings from me, manipulating everything. Tasha took a deep breath, pulling something from her bag. I also wanted to return this. She placed a small bracelet on the table. It was the one I'd given Karen during our trip to Mexico, the one she pretended to lose. I blinked, staring at the bracelet. She really lied about that? Tasha's voice cracked slightly. Yeah. She told me she'd lost it. She didn't want you to have it back. But I think you deserve to know the truth. I stared at the bracelet, my mind racing. You deserve to know the truth. Tasha had been right to come to me. This wasn't just about the broken engagement anymore. This was about everything Karen had taken without ever giving anything in return. I reached for the bracelet and held it for a moment before slipping it into my pocket. Thanks, I said, my voice low, for telling me. Tasha nodded, but her eyes were full of regret. I'm sorry, Daniel. I know this doesn't fix anything, but I wanted you to have the truth. I met her eyes, feeling the weight of the moment. It's not going to change anything, Tasha, but it helps. It really does. She gave a small, sad smile. I know. I just hope you can move on from all of this. I don't think you should keep carrying her baggage. I'm not, I said firmly. I'm done with it. As I left the coffee shop, I couldn't shake the feeling of finality that hung in the air. It wasn't just Karen I was walking away from. It was everything she represented. The lies, the manipulation, the constant feeling of being second choice. I wasn't just letting go of her. I was letting go of the person I thought I needed to be for her. I was done carrying her baggage, and for the first time in months, I felt a lightness I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Tasha's confession didn't change the outcome, but it confirmed what I already knew deep down. I had made the right choice, and now I was free to finally move forward. The flight to Alaska felt like a blur. I don't know if it was the exhaustion of the past few months or the anticipation of stepping into a completely different world, but I barely noticed the hours slipping by. The only thing I could focus on was the thought of being away from everything, away from her. I'd never really traveled solo before, and the thought of being free from all the drama felt almost too good to be true. It wasn't about replacing the life I'd planned with Karen. It was about reclaiming the life I'd lost in the process. I landed in Alaska with a mix of relief and uncertainty. When I stepped out of the airport, the cold air hit me like a slap, sharp and invigorating, the kind of cold that made your lungs burn in the best way. I had never been here before, and everything felt new. The lodge where I'd booked my stay was tucked away in the mountains, far from the chaos of city life, and that's exactly what I needed. The receptionist at the lodge assumed I was there for my honeymoon. She gave me a sympathetic smile when I politely corrected her. "No honeymoon," I said, shrugging. "Just a guy trying to clear his head." She nodded, her expression softening. "I understand. I think everyone needs a reset sometimes." I grabbed my keys and headed to my cabin, feeling a strange mix of excitement and heaviness in my chest. It was as if I were stepping into someone else's life, someone who wasn't weighed down by a failed engagement, someone who could breathe freely again. The next morning, I woke up early. There was a briskness to the air that made everything feel alive. The sun hadn't even fully risen, but I was already pulling on my jacket and heading out. The lodge offered guided fishing trips, but I had no interest in being part of a group. I wanted to be alone, to lose myself in nature, to remember who I was before everything started spiraling out of control. I spent the day hiking through the woods, a camera hanging from my neck. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to capture, but I took shots of everything: the towering trees, the distant mountains, the stillness of the lake. Every click of the shutter felt like another small piece of the weight I had been carrying falling away. As I hiked further into the woods, I saw a woman up ahead, crouched by the water, adjusting a camera. She was focused, completely in the moment, and I hesitated before approaching. I didn't want to disturb her, but she seemed completely at ease, like she belonged here. She noticed me before I could step back. "You don't have to sneak around," she said with a friendly smile. "I'm just taking some pictures." I smiled back, relieved that I wasn't interrupting something important. "No worries, I was just taking in the view." "You must be new here," she said, tilting her head. "I haven't seen you around." "Yeah, just arrived yesterday. Needed a change of scenery." She glanced down at my camera. "I can tell. You're definitely not here for the tourists." "I've never been much of a tourist," I replied, feeling the truth of it in my chest. "I'm here to get away." She nodded, understanding. "I get that. I'm Claire, by the way, a travel photographer. I've been hiking around this area for a while. There are some incredible spots further in if you're interested." Her casual confidence was the kind of thing I hadn't realized I'd missed. She wasn't forcing conversation, wasn't trying to make me feel comfortable. She was just herself. "I'd like that," I said, then added, "I'm Daniel." Claire gave me a nod and led the way down a narrow trail that wound deeper into the forest. We walked in silence for a while, the only sounds our footsteps crunching on the path, the occasional bird calling from the trees. There was no need for small talk, and I was grateful for that. I had no desire to explain myself to anyone. When we reached a clearing, Claire stopped and gestured to the view. "This is one of my favorite spots," she said. "The light hits just right in the late afternoon." I didn't need a camera to capture it. The way the sun bounced off the water, the stillness of the landscape, it was the kind of peace I hadn't known in a long time. "I can see why," I said, standing there for a moment. The air was different here, fresh, untouched. I didn't know how else to describe it. It felt like stepping into a world that had been waiting for me all along. We spent the next few hours exploring the area, sharing stories here and there. Claire didn't ask me about my past, and I didn't volunteer it. There was something liberating about that, about not being expected to explain myself. When we got back to the lodge, the sun was setting, casting everything in soft gold. Claire invited me to join her for dinner by the fire. I agreed, not feeling the need to make excuses or turn her down. I'd been alone long enough. We sat outside, the fire crackling in the center of a rustic pit. She shared stories about the places she'd been, the places she'd seen through her lens, and I listened. It was the first time in months that I wasn't constantly thinking about what had happened with Karen. I wasn't worried about the past or the future. I was just present. The conversation turned to resilience, to the ways we each bounce back from loss. Claire spoke about her travels, how they had shaped her, how they had allowed her to find parts of herself she didn't know existed. I didn't realize it then, but it was the beginning of my own shift. As the fire burned low, I knew one thing for sure. This trip wasn't about replacing Karen. It was about reclaiming myself. And in that moment, I understood that I was moving forward, not because I wanted to forget her, but because I finally had the space to rediscover who I was without the weight of a relationship that never truly fit. I slept better that night than I had in months. I was finally letting go. The moment I returned from Alaska, I thought I had left the past behind me. I was more myself than I had been in months. Hell, maybe even years. The trip had been exactly what I needed. I felt more present, more alive than I'd felt in ages. I had rediscovered the person I was before Karen and all the emotional chaos that came with her. But that didn't mean the ghosts of the past stayed quiet for long. A week after I returned, an email showed up in my inbox from Karen. "Hey Daniel, I know things ended badly, but I've been doing a lot of thinking. I think we need to talk. I miss you. Can we meet? Maybe we can try again." I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. I hadn't expected to hear from her again, not after everything had fallen apart. The last time we spoke, she'd stormed out, insisting this isn't over. I didn't know what part of over she didn't get. I knew exactly what I was supposed to do. I knew what I wanted to do. I was done with the past, done with the lies, done with everything that had been twisted to make me feel like the villain. But for some reason, I found myself hovering over the keyboard, my fingers still. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of it all press down on me again. This wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't about the mess she had made. It was about what I had made of it. And for the first time, I knew exactly what I wanted. I typed slowly but decisively. "Karen, I think we both know this isn't something we can fix." It was never about small things. It was about a fundamental incompatibility. The breakup was hard, but it was the right thing to do. I don't want to meet and try again. I've moved on. I hit send. The relief was instant, but of course the silence didn't last long. Her response came in almost immediately. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Daniel. You've always been so quick to shut things down. We both made mistakes. Maybe we can try to fix things. You're still so important to me." The words stung, but only because they were so familiar, so hollow. It was the same routine, the same manipulation, the same guilt trip. She hadn't changed, and deep down, I knew that was the final confirmation I needed to fully close this chapter. I didn't even open the rest of her email. I hit block. I deleted her contact. I didn't want to hear from her again. The phone didn't ring. The messages didn't come flooding in. For the first time in a long while, I was in control of my own life again. I heard through a few mutual friends that Karen was dating someone new. I didn't know who, and frankly, I didn't care. She'd moved on quickly enough, and that was her choice. But it felt like the universe was finally validating my decision. I couldn't shake the small part of me that wanted to believe she'd come back with some grand gesture, some apology, some explanation. But as time passed, that part of me grew quieter. I had my life back. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I threw myself into work. My auto parts distribution job had never felt so stable, so routine. I started picking up extra shifts, focusing on the small things that made me feel accomplished. And on weekends, I hiked. I visited friends. I spent time in the mountains taking pictures, rediscovering the joy I'd lost in the past few years. One day, Ben and his wife invited me to dinner. They were the kind of couple who made everything look easy. Easy conversation, easy laughter. They were the kind of people I needed in my life, and I was grateful for them. We sat around the table, enjoying a decent bottle of wine, when Ben raised his glass with a grin. "Here's to the best thing that never happened." I chuckled, raising my own glass. To the best thing that never happened. As I looked around the table, something shifted. I realized Ben's toast wasn't just about the end of the engagement. It was about everything, the messy, painful moments that forced me to grow, to stop accepting less than I deserved. It had been painful. It had been humiliating. But I wouldn't change a thing. It pushed me to look at my life and see that I was still here, still whole, and still moving forward. Later that night, as I drove home, I couldn't help but smile. I had my own life now, and I was proud of it. I wasn't expecting much when I got back to town. I'd left the Alaskan wilderness feeling clearer than I'd been in months, but reality always had a way of finding you, especially when you least wanted it. The email from Karen came in one afternoon when I was at work. "I think we should meet. I know things ended badly, but I don't think this is the way it's supposed to be. Maybe we could try again." My first instinct was to delete it, block her, and move on. But something kept me from doing that. Maybe it was the same part of me that had spent years trying to fix things with her, trying to make her see me the way I wanted to be seen. I had to remind myself that the reality of our relationship had been a series of half-truths, manipulations, and unmet expectations. I didn't respond right away. I needed time to think, to really weigh if there was any part of me that still wanted to go back to what we had. But deep down, I knew the answer. No. There was no going back to a relationship built on anything other than my own need to be needed. That night, I sat down and wrote a response. I typed it slowly, letting every word settle as I went. It was firm, calm, and final. Karen, I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I think you're right about one thing. We both made mistakes. But the truth is, the breakup was the right decision. We've tried to make something work that wasn't meant to be. I've moved on, and I hope you can too. I reread it a few times. I wasn't being harsh, but I wasn't going to backtrack either. I didn't want to meet her and get pulled into the same cycle again. I clicked send before I could second guess myself. Then I blocked her email. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A message from Ben. Dinner tonight? Your place or ours? I was grateful for the distraction. Ben had become one of the few constants in my life, and he didn't ask questions when I didn't want to answer. He knew the breakup had hit me hard, but he also knew I didn't need constant reminders of it. We could talk about anything, except Karen. I spent the day getting ready, cleaning up my apartment, making sure everything was in order. I didn't need any more surprises. The doorbell rang around 7 p.m. Ben and his wife Sarah were standing there with smiles, a bottle of wine in hand. Can't wait to eat your cooking, Ben said as he walked in, heading straight for the kitchen. Sarah didn't believe you could pull it off, but I'm betting she's wrong. I'll do my best, I said with a smile, feeling the weight of the past few months starting to lift. We spent the evening chatting about work, about their dog, and about everything that wasn't related to my past with Karen. I needed that. After dinner, as we sat around the table, Ben raised his glass. To Daniel, he said, his grin wide. To the best thing that never happened. We all laughed, and I realized, for the first time in a long time, I truly felt a sense of relief. The words echoed in my mind as I took a sip of wine. The best thing that never happened. That moment, that toast, was everything I needed. In one simple statement, Ben had articulated what I hadn't been able to admit to myself for months. It was all right. Everything that happened, the heartbreak, the pain, the confusion, had brought me to this point. A point where I was free. Later that night, after Ben and Sarah left, I sat on my couch, reflecting on everything. The pain I'd felt was real, but it wasn't permanent. I had lived through it, and now I was standing on my own, stronger than I had been in years. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even sad. I was simply free. The next day, I got another email from Karen. It was brief, almost dismissive. I guess that's it then. I didn't respond. Instead, I went about my day. I went to work, met up with a few old friends, and started setting new goals for myself. Karen was a part of my past, but she was no longer my present. In the weeks that followed, I heard through mutual friends that she was dating someone new. At first, I didn't care, but as I thought about it more, I realized something important. It didn't bother me. I wasn't jealous. I wasn't holding on to anything. I wasn't even thinking about her much at all. I had built something for myself in the months since the breakup. A life that didn't revolve around trying to fix someone else's mistakes. I didn't need her approval, her attention, or her validation anymore. I had finally become the person I was meant to be without her. And as I walked into work that morning, my heart light and my mind clear, I realized how much I had changed. The humiliation I'd once felt from the live stream had turned into clarity. The embarrassment of that public breakup had given me something priceless. Freedom. For the first time, I wasn't holding on to something that was never meant to be, and that, in itself, was the greatest gift I could have given myself. The rest of the day passed by in a blur of tasks, meetings, and small victories. I ended the day with a feeling I hadn't had in a long time. Peace. Real peace. It wasn't something I was seeking, it was something I was already living. As I made my way home that evening, I passed by a small park. I stopped for a moment, taking in the sight of the trees, the fresh air, the quiet. It was the kind of night that reminded me that life goes on, whether you're ready for it or not. I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. I was living my life, one step at a time, and I was finally at peace with that. 1 year later, I found myself sitting at a small table in the corner of Ben and Sarah's dining room. The dinner had been simple, nothing fancy, but that didn't matter. The evening had all the elements of something I had come to appreciate: comfort, familiarity, and a few good laughs. Ben raised his glass first, and I knew what was coming. He always had a knack for the perfect toast. "To Daniel," he said with a grin, "to the best thing that never happened." I laughed, raising my glass in return. To the best thing that never happened. We all clinked glasses. It wasn't just about Karen anymore, not really. I'd spent so much time caught up in the aftermath, the hurt, the guilt, the weight of everything I had to process. But tonight, it was about the clarity that had come with time, the time that had allowed me to see things for what they really were, not what I'd hoped them to be. The best thing that never happened. It felt true. I had spent so many months trying to hold on to a relationship that wasn't meant to last. And now, sitting here with my two closest friends, I realized just how much I had gained in the process. My life was my own again. "Man," Ben said, leaning back in his chair, "I gotta say, I didn't know you had it in you." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean, after everything with Karen, how quickly you just walked away." He paused for a moment, looking thoughtful. "I think it took guts, but you did it. And look at you now." I chuckled, feeling the truth of his words hit home. "It didn't feel like guts back then," I said, staring down at my wine glass. "It felt like I was losing everything. But then, over time, it became clear that walking away was the only option." Sarah nodded from across the table. "It was hard to watch, Daniel," she said softly. "But I think it's the best thing you could have done. You were holding on to something that wasn't real. I could see it even before you did." "I know," I said, my voice quiet. "But it's funny, you know, how something that felt like humiliation at the time turned into freedom." Ben smiled knowingly. "I think you learned more about yourself in those months than you ever would have by sticking it out with her." I nodded. It had been hard, but it had also been one of the most transformative periods of my life. The self-doubt, the guilt, the questioning of my worth, all of it had been stripped away over time, and now I was just me, no longer tethered to someone else's idea of who I should be. "You know," Sarah added, "sometimes it takes a public moment like that to show us who we really are. No filters, no pretending, just raw truth." I smiled at the insight, my mind drifting back to that fateful live stream. That one moment when everything fell apart. In the past, I might have seen it as the worst thing that could have happened to me, but now I saw it for what it really was. A chance to face the truth early, before things got any more complicated, before I kept going down a road that wasn't meant for me. Ben leaned forward, his grin widening. "So, have you heard anything from Karen since all that?" I sighed, not really expecting to answer that question. "Yeah, she emailed me a few months ago. She wanted to meet up, try again." "Are you kidding?" Ben laughed. "And what did you say?" I told her no. I looked up at him, meeting his eyes with a steady gaze. I told her it was a fundamental incompatibility, that we weren't meant to be, and it wasn't something we could fix. Sarah's eyes softened. "You did the right thing, Daniel. She's moved on, and so have you." I nodded. "Yeah, I guess I did. But you know, it wasn't just about her. It was about me, what I was willing to accept, what I was willing to fight for. And I don't think I'll ever go back to the person I was before." The conversation drifted to other topics, but I kept coming back to that one thought. I wasn't the same person I was when Karen and I were engaged. I wasn't the same person who had been desperately trying to fix a relationship that wasn't right. I had changed, I had learned, and I was stronger for it. As the evening wore on, I found myself feeling a deep sense of gratitude, not just for Ben and Sarah, but for the journey I'd been through, for the clarity that had come from all the pain, and even for that one unfiltered live stream, the moment that had forced me to see the truth about my life and my future. I knew now that I could face whatever came next. I could face the unknown with a strength I didn't even know I had, because I had finally learned how to walk away from something that wasn't serving me, to step into my own life on my own terms. Later, after dinner, as I stood outside Ben and Sarah's house, the cool air biting at my skin, I looked up at the stars. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't weighed down by the past. I was just here, and that felt like freedom. I took a deep breath and smiled to myself. This was the life I had built, on my own, and it was exactly what I needed.